Go to Acts chapter 10. Acts chapter 10. When God sends Peter to a Gentile named Cornelius. Let me show you what Peter says about Gentiles. Verse 28. Acts 10:28. Verse 28. And he said unto them, Peter to these Gentiles, ye know how that it is lawful for a man, is that what it said? An unlawful thing. The law of God did not permit these Jews to have any dealings with Gentiles. Look what he says. For a man that is a Jew to keep company or even come unto one of another nation. But then, Peter got that vision, but God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. How did Peter go from saying it's unlawful to now he's all out there at the Gentile headquarters, eating with the Gentiles, hanging out with them? Oh, that's a huge change, huge change. Look at there. He did eat with the Gentiles, Galatians 2, verse 12. But when they were come, these Jewish men from Jerusalem, James sent to check out the situation, believing Jews, but they were of a circumcision program. He withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which are of the circumcision. Here these religious Jews come in their nice caravan from Jerusalem, checking out the scene. And when Peter sees them, he leaves the Gentiles. He's just like, oh, yeah, go back over here with my boys from Jerusalem. And he went religious on them. That's what he did. He went from eating with the Gentiles and fellowshipping with brethren who trust Jesus Christ, who are of other nations, uncircumcised men, to being nice and religious again. Now, we're going to take our break here. That's a good place to take a break. And then we're going to get right back into the rest of the soap opera, because it's a soap opera, okay? Galatians chapter 2 again. Where we left off, I call it a soap opera because it is a pretty dramatic thing. You don't have to watch Young and the Restless. You can just get in your scriptures. And it's a soap opera. This is all through the scriptures. Here, the soap opera is the head apostle to Israel and the head apostle to us Gentiles are going face to face. Look at chapter 2, verse 11 again. But when Peter was coming to Antioch, that's Paul, withstood him to the face. See, being in grace doesn't mean, everything is just, soft and stuff. He confronted this man, Peter. Not just this man, the apostle that Christ gave the keys to the kingdom. Peter was the only apostle who could do something without 2 or 3 others. Christ says, I give it to you, Peter. He gave it to with 2 or 3, but Peter could make decisions like he did in Acts 8 when he put a man's sins back on him named Simon Bar-Jesus. And yet our apostle Paul withstands him to the face. This has to do with confrontation. Sometimes you got to have tough love, and he's about to get it. Watch this. I withstood him to the face. Why? Because he was to be blamed. Peter did something that he did wrong, and Paul is about to put the blame on him. What did he do? Verse 12. For before that, certain came from James. He did eat with the Gentiles, but when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them of the circumcision. Verse 13. And the other Jews dissembled likewise with him. All the Jews who were amongst these Gentile heathens out there, but who were saved, they weren't heathens anymore, they were saints. When these religious, pious men, believing Jews come from Jerusalem, James sent them to get a report. They didn't have email, they didn't have cell phones. They actually had to send people to get a message. When they came, all the Jews, they saw Peter do it, so they did it. When your leader do it, that led them to do it. But not just the Jews. Watch this. What Peter didn't just have an effect on the Jews. Verse 13. And the other Jews dissembled. That word dissembled, when you put something together, you assemble it. You get a, I'm going to have to call Bill Connor over. If we have a little child and I buy him a bike or something, I ain't going to put the thing together. It wouldn't be right. I said, Bill, come on, assemble this bike. Some assembly required. It was built. But what happened was they disassembled. It was like how that bike would look if I got to fixing it. It would be disassembled. That's what they did. They disassembled. And they were an assembly. They were one. And all of a sudden, they start breaking down because of religion, okay? They dissembled likewise with him. Now, here's what floored the apostle. Verse 13, insomuch that Barnabas also was carried about with their dissimulation. If you don't know who Barnabas is, stick with our study of the book of Acts, because he's very prominent. Barnabas was the easiest guy to get along with in the world. He was the guy who could deal with anybody, man. He was called the son of consolation, the consoler. He was that soft-hearted guy who could do with anything. He was Paul's right-hand man, went to battle with him, spiritual battles. And Barnabas got affected by these religious Jews. That's important. Religion can get you if you don't stick with Paul. Paul looked at Barnabas and said, Barnabas, you too. What happened? Watch this. Here's what happened, verse 14. But when Paul saw, you know, what's going to keep you from religion is being with the Apostle Paul, being in his truth. But when I saw that they, all those Jews, walk not, what's that next word? Uprightly. See, they bent the truth a little bit and they didn't walk uprightly. They didn't stand in uprightly according to or in line with the truth of the gospel. That term, truth of the gospel, has to do with what's the truth of the gospel of grace? That it doesn't matter whether you are a Jewish person or a Gentile. It doesn't matter if you're a male or female, bond or free. Your race, your social status, your gender, doesn't matter if you're in Christ. And God is not looking at you after the flesh like you're a Jew or Gentile. In the dispensation of grace, we don't know any man after the flesh. But when those guys separated themselves from the uncircumcised Gentile believers, they were doing something that God did not like. And they were making being a Jew the issue. And he got mad. Paul got mad. Look at him. Verse 14. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, again, that has to do with there's no difference today between Jew and Gentile. I said unto Peter, now look at those next three words, before them all. Paul is about to make the leader of that Jewish church, kingdom church, an example. Watch this. If thou being a Jew, again, that term Jew, the brother asked earlier, what's the difference between Hebrew and a Jew? Well, Hebrew is their race. Hebrew. It's also their tongue. That's the name of their language, but it's their race. Israelite is their nation. That's their nationality. They're Israelites, the nation of Israel. But that term Jew in Scripture has to do with their religion. Every Jewish boy and girl was born into that religion back here. They had no choice, just like the Muslims today. They're just born in, everybody's a Muslim over there. You're born into it. Well, you were born under that law of Moses, made under the law. That's a Jew, okay? Now watch this. If thou being a Jew, Peter, livest after the manner of the Gentiles. He goes, you're not putting yourself, God gave you the freedom not to be under that performance-based acceptance program that is ceased for now. And you chose to use your liberty and freedom to eat with Gentiles. You're living like a Gentile. And not as do the Jews. See, Peter wasn't going back. He wasn't doing all those Jewish rites and rituals and things that he used to do amongst these Gentiles. Okay? Keep reading. And not as do the Jews. Why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? Peter didn't go up to the Gentiles and says, be a Jew, be a Jew. When he separated himself, they watching him and they go, oh, it must be a big deal to be Jewish. And Paul, that word compel means to force and by threat, to constrain. It's the Greek word, now watch this, to nag. It's like somebody wants you to do something and you're not willing to do it, but you keep nagging. By what Peter did, he forced these Gentiles to see, oh, it must be something being a Jew. Look at chapter 6, verse 12. Here's the same word, Greek word used there. Verse 12 of chapter 6 of Galatians. Paul talking about these religious leaders. As many as desire to make a fair show in the flesh, that's religion, they constrain you to be circumcised. That word constrain is the same Greek word compellus. In other words, religion says, you get saved by grace through faith in the blood of Christ, but you better get water baptized just so you can be right with God. You know how they do that? It's an outward sign. They were making people do something God didn't require. That's what he's saying. Go back over there. Galatians chapter 2. By separating himself, he was making the Gentiles that Paul gave a grace message to actually go and be Jews. How's a Gentile going to be a Jew? Start going to law. The whole book of Galatians is about the difference between law and grace. just like religion, our brethren in denominations today, they're under some type of performance, whatever their church is. You just name it, Baptist, Evangelical, Free, whatever. Every church has a set of instructions along this legalistic wall. Some are more legalistic. Women can't wear this, can't go there, can't do this, can't look at that. Some are a little less, but they all under here. That's what living like a Jew is, being religious, legalistic. Now keep reading. Verse 15, we who are Jews by nature. Now, that's something important. When Paul says we, he's putting himself with those Jews, but not as a Jew. Now watch what he says. Jews how? By what? Nature. Paul is not, he's not identifying himself with those religious Jews, but in one way. He was born a Jew. He was a born Jew. All of those had something in common. They were born Jews. Before the Apostle Paul became a grace believer, he was born under the law. He was a Jew, right? He was a religious Jew. So that's why he didn't say we Jews. He says we Jews by nature. That's the way that Paul identified. So watch this. We who are Jews by nature, Paul, Peter, and the rest of those Jewish guys, and not sinners of the Gentiles. That term, sinners of the Gentiles, every once in a while, I'll go and read secular Jewish writings. That was a very common term in that day, just simply meaning the heathen. When the Jews back in Paul's day spoke about the Gentiles, they would actually write, whether they wrote it or spoke, they would say, sinners of the Gentiles. That's what they would call them. We'd know them as the heathen. So there were two classes of people in Paul's day. There were Jews by nature and sinners of the Gentiles. That sinner means they didn't have the law, basically. I'll show you something. I'll show you that. All right, you got Galatians 2? Let's go right through it. Verse 16, here's the passage. Knowing. Paul says, us natural-born Jews, me, Paul, you, Peter, and the rest, we know something because of what I explained to you about grace. Knowing that a man is not justified, how? By the works of the what? In the dispensation of God's grace. That's simply what Paul is talking about. Back there they were. John the Baptist's parents, Elizabeth and Zacharias, Luke chapter 1. It says that they were righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances blameless. You did have righteousness before Paul under the law. In the future, I showed you over there in James chapter 2. Even those who have the faith of Jesus Christ, they must perform the works of James 2 to get into the kingdom. They do have to perform. Not us today.